Hey, Donna Schwartz here from the Everything Saxophone Podcast, and I'm here with someone who grew up pretty close to my hometown, and I didn't even know that. I'm here with Reggie Padilla, saxophonist, author, okay, and he also has an EP out as well. He also has a really awesome video out that no one would have thought about before. We're going to get into that in a bit, though. Remind me, Reggie, to talk about this, but I wanted to welcome to the Everything Saxophone Podcast, Reggie Padilla. Welcome.
Hi, Donna. Thanks for having me. It's a pleasure to be on the show.
It's awesome to have you on. I know we've been Facebook friends for a while, and what's really cool is that we both grew up on Long Island. Long Island. It's one word, everybody. Long Island, just to let you know. And you're actually my second guest in a row. Where Scott Littroff, also another Long Island person, as well. So I thought that was really cool. But you know what I'd love to do? I want people to get to know who you are. And now that we know that you're from Long Island, although not right now, you're living in Hawaii. So totally, totally different, right? Totally different parts of the states for sure, from one end to the other. But I want to get into your journey. When did you first get involved with music? Not even saxophone, but with music.
I would say, well, I grew up in a musical household in the sense that my parents were always exposing me to Broadway musicals,
Cool.
classical music, opera, a lot of Beatles and Simon and Garfunkel, and big band and jazz music. So it was always around the house. But formally, I started studying piano at age 7.
Oh,
And
wow. That's good. That's actually a good thing. I wish I took piano. I have two right hands. I mean, left hand for me is just awful, but I'm sorry. Anyway, go on.
I kind of fell into the saxophone by accident. I have a brother that's 5 years older than me. And once he got to high school, he was just kind of like, I think I'm into girls right now. I don't feel like practicing, or he thought the electric guitar was cooler too. That was the other thing.
Oh, yeah.
So my parents had just bought him an alto and he used it for like a year and a half. So at that point, they were just like, oh, what are we going to do with this thing? Oh, let's let Reggie play it. So once I got to fourth grade at the age of 9, I started playing saxophone. So
Got it.
they had all those, what do you call those? The instrument zoo, like where they let all the students try out everything. But since I already owned a saxophone, they were just like, oh, well, there you go. That's what you're going to play. So it's kind of by accident or it was because my brother quit also. So I just became a saxophone player.
It works out that way, but you know what's interesting, and myself being a former band director, often many kids want to play saxophone and not enough want to play clarinet and all that kind of thing. And I've often had a lot of kids who want to play saxophone, but their hands were too small and they couldn't reach around the keys. And I know my good friend Rulon from Key Leaves, okay, he's not sponsoring this episode, actually P Mauriat is, but Rulon from Key Leaves came up with this. He's so brilliant. This guy is so brilliant. He came up with this awesome invention that you could take off the palm keys
Right.
and
Yeah.
like the right hand keys so that young kids can play it. I mean, I wish I had the brains to think of that, but
So
that didn't
cool.
happen back then. So, and so like I'd be steering people to like clarinet or flute to start with, but that's cool that you got the chance for a wind instrument to be able to start on the saxophone. And, Long Island schools are really good when it comes to music programs, and you said but you went to a different elementary school than what I was thinking. So yeah, talk about that.
Yeah, so I went to St. Dominic's Elementary School in Oyster Bay, and I was fortunate enough. They had a band program. It was small, but they had one, so I got that experience. And I'm noticing the contrast here in Hawaii. Like I have kids, and my son is 10. He plays the trumpet, but the band programs here don't start until 6th or 7th grade.
Yeah.
So he's got all this time where he's playing, and so I'm just fortunate that I was able to start at 9 in a band program. So.
Yeah. No, you know what's interesting? There's one program on Long Island in Brentwood. I think they're still doing this. They start them in seventh grade,
Hmm.
just like in New York City. So I also taught in the city for one semester, and they started this actually. I don't even know if I should say this out loud. I'm gonna. The school that I taught at, and it was in a very nice area, but a lot of the kids that lived in that nice area didn't go to this public school, New York City public schools. Huge enrollment. Kids started in seventh grade, but they did not allow every single kid to have the opportunity to play an instrument.
Oh
Get
no.
this. They chose the classes that had the smartest students, and then they chose one class of students that were not quote unquote as smart to be allowed to take an instrument. There were, like in seventh grade, there were probably, let's say, for argument's sake, 10 classes, 10 divisions, and maybe like 35 kids in a class. Only three of the classes were allowed to take instruments.
Oh man, that's
That's, yeah, I know, right? And so that's the first thing. And me growing up on Long Island, and I'm like, are you kidding?
everyone had access to it, right? Like if you wanted to do it, you,
Yeah, yeah. So, it just blows my mind thinking back to that, and and feeling really bad, for those kids that just will never, you never know, right? But the cool thing though, you had that opportunity, and um, your son will have the opportunity, it's a little bit later, but I just wanted to interject with that. So you went to St. Dominic's, and then you went to, I think you said Chaminade, right?
correct. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
So there, I would say that was the first time I was in a jazz program. It started out as a pep band. Now they have like a pretty big program as far as like chamber orchestra, jazz bands, et cetera. But I was under the direction of Brian Lewis. I think he's
Oh
still there.
yeah. He had a
And
shop.
yeah, the Lewis Music on it was Jericho Turnpike, right?
That's right. Oh my God. That was a good place. He had some really good, there's a couple of places on Long Island that were really good. He had a really good shop with a lot of, and I gauge it like this. What kind of accessories are they selling? And when they're selling accessories that I think are really good, then I know that that person knows what they're talking about.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And then his brother, in fact, lives out on Oahu as well. And
Oh my
yeah,
gosh.
his brother used to be with Buddy Rich in the 80s, and he runs a big band over here. So I play in that big band. It's at the Blue Note Waikiki on the last Monday of the month.
Wow.
But yeah, I still have that Long Island connection to Chaminade and Lewis music and everything. But I would say, like I was able to continue on with concert band at Chaminade High School. And then fortunately, Mr. Lewis, it was, there wasn't a jazz band yet. So we did like a pep band first, and then it kind of like, it started expanding into a big band. But there, I would have to say that was like my first introduction to jazz. I mean, he took the class out to see Maynard Ferguson one time and John Patitucci another time. So, I was exposed to the music then,
Wow.
and that's kind of got me further along into the world of jazz and saxophone, et cetera.
When were you taking any kind of lessons outside of school?
I was doing private piano lessons, and when I got to Chaminade, I had a teacher, an older teacher named Marino Delalio, who was like a woodwind quadrupler. He just played everything, and so those were my initial private lessons. And then in high school, I got it into the CW Post music department pre-college program.
Okay.
So I was taking like music theory classes there, piano lessons, and then doing some chamber music and this during the school year and the summer too. That was also super influential to me. I studied with a pianist there named Stephanie Watt. I think she's still there at LIU. But yeah, that was so. Even though I'm on a saxophone podcast, I did my undergraduate in classical piano performance.
We were talking before we started filming. That's really interesting. And I have to say this too. Um, CW Post, even Adelphi, even Hofstra, their music programs were almost non-existent when I was in high school.
Mm-hmm.
And, it was, I mean, we knew, like those of us that want to go into music knew you essentially you got to get off Long Island if you wanted to get any kind of degrees in anything. And just in like the 10 years that, you were there ready to go to college and stuff like that. But even before that, having the pre-college programs, that's really good because there was nothing,
Yeah.
nothing.
It's funny that you said Adelphi also. I went to like an after school program. I forgot the name of the trumpet player that was running, but it was at Adelphi. It was a jazz improv workshop that I got to go to through Brian Lewis also. He like gave us information to go there, and it was really great. Yeah. So I think those schools come a long way. I hope they're still doing well now. And
Oh,
you know,
I'm sure they are, and I wasn't even aware of that. And the thing is, the whole thing like Adelphi. No, you're going to go to Adelphi for nursing.
right,
Hofstra is going to be for like some sciences and stuff like that.
right.
CW Post was generalist and all that kind of thing. That's so interesting to me, and I'm happy about that too. Sad for myself, but happy about that too, because in my days it was oh my gosh, it was an occasional workshop at maybe Huntington High School. That's where I met Andy Farber, actually.
Oh yeah, yeah. He subbed for my big band at CW Post. At the time, my first 2 years, it was under the direction of Alex Stewart. I don't know if you know that saxophone player.
No, I don't.
He's at the University of Vermont now, I think, but he was like a pretty big jazz figure in Long Island for a while. I think he played a Lionel Hampton big band, and then he was in the Long Island Funk Philharmonic. I think they were playing like Tower stuff and like that kind of music. But so he would have Andy come in sometimes and like sub for him when he couldn't make it. It was so I met Andy probably around 97, 98 too. Just having him as a substitute. So yeah, it was amazing. And at the time at CW Post, so 97 to 01, my guest clinicians, I had Doc Severinsen, Phil Woods was one of
Oh,
them. Jim Snydero was one. Um, what's the guy? Billy Taylor. We had one year. So
wow.
I mean, just being in proximity, of course, to Manhattan, but we still had top notch master classes. We also had what's his name? It's Wynton Marsalis's old piano player. Mark, is it Marcus Roberts? I think that's
Is it no, not Marcus Roberts. I have to look on one of my albums. You're gonna look it up right now, but you know what's really interesting though, I'm still blown away by this because again, these schools that I grew up knowing as like not at all music oriented, there was I think this kind of renaissance that happened, and it happened like in the I'm gonna say like the mid 90s,
Mhm.
where a lot of jazz musicians, like I pick one person in particular, a guy that went to college with me, Bob Cassera, great trombone player. This guy, and he was so funny too, and he's such an incredible person. And so he was in the union playing all union gigs. He studied with great teachers and stuff like that. All take all types of gigs, jazz, classical, whatnot. But then he had made the decision that, you know what, I think I need to go into teaching because the jobs back then weren't as steady,
Right.
and for his caliber, I mean, he was incredibly high caliber. And Bob and a lot of people that I knew that would normally go into performance full time were going into teaching. And the caliber, I think, of music teachers just exploded.
Mhm.
And in more ways than one, not just playing ability in general, but also jazz knowledge. And I think that Long Island, it was strong for jazz even before people like Bob started teaching there and all that kind of stuff. But it got stronger because you had people of Bob's caliber also teaching and, filling up all the departments in all of the Long Island schools. So it was pretty
Sure.
solid. And that's why every year, like Allstate, a lot of kids come from Long Island, Allstate Jazz. A lot of kids come from Long Island because a lot of the teachers are jazz musicians. And so, they're imparting that to their students at an early age. So, who was that piano player's name?
Marcus Roberts. So yeah, he
Marcus
played with
Roberts. Okay.
yeah a while back. Yeah. So but yeah, so I had a master class with him on piano. Actually, that was really inspiring thing to do. And then one of my teachers, you probably know him too, but I studied jazz piano with Rich Iacona.
Oh, yeah, yeah. Oh my
So
gosh, I love that.
he was at LIU when I was doing my undergrad, and he was heavily influential to me, getting me to listen to great players and learn about jazz voicings and arranging and stuff. So yeah, it was a good time. A
Well,
lot
let
of
me ask you this question. So you're doing your undergrad a piano, but it wasn't just classical?
yeah. So like I part of the reason I went to LIU is that they offered me a good amount of scholarship money, but in the stipulation that I join all these groups. So I was playing piano for the vocal jazz group. I was playing alto in the wind ensemble. Then eventually ended up playing alto and tenor in the big band. So I was just kind of spread it around. But yeah, I also studied saxophone while I was there too.
Okay, how were you able to do that, I mean, without maybe paying extra and stuff like that? Because if your major was piano, how were you able to handle, manage that, I should say?
Thanks to Chaminade High School, I finished my entire undergrad freshman year during my senior year of high school. So I had, I got all the core curriculum out of the way, and I was just chopping away at my major. So I had two majors actually, accounting also, so
Oh
accounting
gosh.
and piano.
So you have no problem with your taxes. But getting back to the music. All right, so then yeah, so you were still playing saxophone. You were saying that you had that all-around doubler as a teacher, and you were playing in the jazz bands, all that kind of thing. What made you focus more on saxophones and, like why not continue on piano?
That's a good question. I mean, I want to say that from 2001 to about 2007, it was both instruments were, I would say, they were my main instruments, and I would try to perform on each of them equally. But around 2008, that's around the time I moved to Hawaii. I started really just focusing on the saxophone and tenor in particular. And I just, I love the voice that I had on saxophone. I love improvising with a single line instrument for some reason over the piano. But I mean, I love both instruments, and I still practice both daily. But something about the saxophone around that time really got me inspired to just solely focus on that.
And I kind of know the answer to this though, but having that background on piano, and whether it was just classical, but also you had jazz as well, I'm sure that that really helped your improvisation on saxophone.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, I encourage all my students to at least take some fundamental piano and then some also fundamental jazz piano. So when I'm playing the saxophone, there's times where I see the piano in my head, kind of like a player piano with the keys going down. Like even though I'm in B flat, I could still, I still see keys going down. Sometimes I see like blank staff paper being populated with like the lines that I want to make. But in particular, like the piano, I think it's such a great visual aid for jazz theory. It's just having it laid out there in front of you, being able to see intervals and distances like that. And then also you could, play the harmonies that you're going to be playing lines over with your saxophone. So I feel like having been a piano player also gives me like a deeper understanding of harmony and music theory, and being able to apply that on the saxophone as an improviser was huge. I feel like it's almost I have an unfair advantage to someone that doesn't play piano at all.
Well, yeah, and it's not even just a question of understanding how to form the chords, but you've also heard chords
Right.
where the hard thing is a wind player, single line player, right? So it's hard for us if we have no piano background to hear chords. And for a lot of people that take up the instrument later on in life that also didn't take up piano, it's a hard thing for them to grasp in terms of chords and hearing them and stuff.
Absolutely. Yeah. So yeah, I encourage everyone, even if it's not your main instrument, take some piano, so take some time with the piano. And I think, in most current day programs, it's probably you're at least required to do like one or two semesters of piano, right?
Yeah, yeah, for sure. And the other thing too, though, here's another reason why taking piano may be good too. For a lot of people that play trumpet or play saxophone or play flute or whatever, and they're playing jazz, they tend to get lost in the form all the time. And it's because they're not focusing on like the right instruments and stuff. And I'm thinking also like if you do take piano, and even if it's fundamental piano, but if you start to take some comping, if you understand how to comp, which means accompany, the thing that I think will help your jazz playing, because a lot of people will listen to a piano player accompany and get totally off track because you're not doing things on downbeats. You're using a lot of syncopation and filling in gaps and stuff like that.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. And if you're able to hear the harmony and be able to identify the chords without even having to play them and just having that in your head, it's absolutely a great way to be aware of the form or where you are in the form.
Yeah, and also and being aware in the form, but also understanding the role of other instruments,
Hmm.
in a jazz band and stuff. And so, all right, so 2008, what made you move to Hawaii?
So I had an auntie that lived here that I visited in the past that was friends with my father. It was his old college classmate. And when we were visiting out in 2003, she just said, we have an extra room in the house if you ever
Wow.
think about coming over. So I had that in the back of my head. And I started surfing around 2000 in Long Island. I would surf in like Tobay and Gilgo, and eventually I started surfing in Long Beach, which is like a really great
Oh,
surfing town. Yeah. So by that point, between 2000 and 2007, I really became like I just loved surfing, almost addicted to it. I had to do it, and like there's some surfers in New York that brave the winter, and I wasn't one of them. I would probably surf until like October, November, and then put my boards away until May, and then Memorial Day I'd surf again, right? Um, so the thought of my aunt having an extra room and me falling in love with surfing, that had a lot to do with it. And actually, my best friend that also went to CW Post, he actually teaches music in Brentwood now, but he first moved to Hawaii the year before I did, and I was just like, wow, he did it. And so he kind of paved the way for me. His name's Johan Montero, so he's a trumpet player. He also went to LIU, and he teaches music in Brentwood, and he does like audio tech stuff too.
oh,
So yeah, so he paved the way, and then I just followed him. And then initially, I came out there with a K through 12 Mus Ed degree from NYU.
oh, okay.
I did my master's there at NYU before moving to Hawaii. And initially I thought, this will be good. I could get like a band director job and surf, in the afternoons and the weekends. But um, once I arrived in Honolulu, I just noticed how, the vibe was really welcoming, and there was a lot of gigs going around, a lot of places to play, more than I had the opportunity in New York, just kind of being like a smaller pond. And then
Oh,
it's kind of like the wedding industry is all year round, the convention industry is all year round, and there's like
right.
there's a bunch of hotels to play music at and restaurants. And so I found myself playing more, and I eventually ended up just kind of postponing that band director gig, and I just kind of kept playing and playing and honing my skills as a performer. Actually, more so here, I was just kind of on the bandstand like 4 or 5 nights a week. And
Wow.
I feel like, as much as I love New York, it's super competitive. And,
Sure.
I wasn't gigging that amount, anywhere close to that amount, in 2000, between 2000 and 2007. So,
Wow.
um, yeah.
That's, see, now this is interesting because we had Jason Gay on the podcast too, who's also in Hawaii right now as well. And, I took a trip to Hawaii many years ago, but it's expensive to live there. And I'm just thinking to myself, like, gosh, are there really that many opportunities? And are they paying you well enough to be able to like afford to live in Hawaii?
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely expensive, but coming from New York, there wasn't too much like sticker shock with the pricing. I mean, yeah, the groceries are a lot more expensive, but then our sales tax is half. I think yours is what, like 8%, right?
Well,
And
and in Los Angeles now
oh,
it's
yeah,
like,
you're in Los Angeles,
oh,
right?
it's worse. It's closing in on 10%, but the
Right.
gas prices are stupid. Uh,
Yeah, yeah. So we have, I mean, like, so we have a 4% sales tax. It's not as crazy as New York or LA. And but yeah, I mean, there's a good amount of work, and I think if you're versatile and you're willing to do education, which like I studied, and I'd been teaching lessons since I was about 16, 17 years old. So, it's kind of a no-brainer. So I think if you're willing to be versatile, like I play all different kinds of music. I do, weddings, whether it's classical music or jazz. I sometimes there's a municipal band called the Royal Hawaiian Band that I used to sub in. Every now and then, sometimes the symphony needs saxophone players when they do like some Gershwin stuff, or they'll do like rock tributes and things like that. So sometimes I get to sub with the symphony,
cool.
and of course I teach too. So I teach private lessons. And before I had my kids, I taught at the University of Hawaii. I did the big band for 5 years. So
Oh, cool. Yeah. So definitely, as you said, being versatile, which is a good tip for people if you are wherever you are. We have people all over the world and stuff like that. But if you're thinking of moving to a new area, just keeping that in mind and keeping an open mind, so
absolutely.
that you can find, opportunities and stuff like that. And so
Yeah.
Yeah, and the cool thing is that you're playing more often than you did in New York, and you didn't necessarily have to teach in public schools,
Right.
in order to make an income to support yourself, which is pretty cool.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I'm just super, I feel super lucky and blessed to be able to just like everything I do is music. In fact, after we do the interview today, I have home recording to do, like for different clients. So whether they need a sax solo or some horn lines recorded. So, that's another source of income too. So that's just goes along with what we were saying about being versatile. So,
You know what? I want to go down that rabbit hole for a second. Okay, so let's talk about home recording, right, for saxophone players. So, like, a lot of it is about equipment and stuff. Can you talk about the type of equipment that you use?
absolutely. So the DAW digital audio workstation I use is Apple Logic, Logic Pro. So I record into that software. And then the other components that you need a good audio interface. So I use a Focusrite 2x2
Okay,
interface. Yeah, so it
okay,
just has two inputs. And then, microphones they're kind of subjective, but I actually use the one that I'm speaking into now. It's a Shure KSM32 condenser microphone.
okay.
But I've used like what else have I used? I think it's a RE20,
Oh, the ribbon mic?
right? This one, I think this one's a dynamic mic. Let me
Okay, got it.
right this
I tried ribbon mics, and I know that, excuse me, I've tried ribbon mics, and people have said that those are the best. Studios will use that because of the certain type of sound that comes out, this dry
right.
kind of sound. Um, I have a problem though, personally with that. It kind of it's hard for me to use a ribbon mic. I'm expecting something and I'm not hearing it, when I'm going through the
Yeah.
headphones and stuff, and it kind of throws me off.
Yeah, so yeah, I mean, I've used ribbon mics in other professional studios, but they've always kind of been out of reach for me just because of the price range. They're pretty
Ridiculous.
pretty expensive. I've used the Royers and other studios, but I've had a lot of success with this Shure. I feel like it's kind of like a sleeper mic that people don't think like, oh, I'm gonna go grab the Shure KSM 32 for my home studio. They probably have other models in mind. So I use this one condenser mic, but that EV RE20 is another one. That's a dynamic microphone that gets the job done. And I've recorded stuff for people's albums. I've done a couple things for local TV here, music video type things, and so I think if you have a good audio interface and a decent microphone, I mean, this one it doesn't break the bank too much. I think it's around like $400 or $500.
That's not bad.
So, but yeah, I mean, it's like every month I'm doing a session at home. Of course, I love going to a studio too. In fact, there's people doing construction too across the street, so it's not always the best environment. You know, um, but yeah, I mean, gives me a lot of versatility to send someone a solo, and like I've had clients from Canada, from the Philippines, from Europe, where they're like, "Oh, I really like your playing. Can you record over my song?" And that's the beauty of modern day technology. I could send them a WAV file that I recorded over the song, and then and just they put that together in their studio, and then we're just collaborating all over the world.
That's cool. And let me ask you something. So, when you're recording your part, are you recording it dry, like no effects?
Well, usually I'll put effects just for my own personal hearing, so my own monitoring. So I'll put some reverb and
Okay.
that's really it. Maybe some EQ on it. But then when I send the client the WAV file, it's completely dry.
Got it. Okay, and that's good for people to know too. Like if you're interested in recording for people, because you do want to send a dry, you want dry meaning no effects.
No,
Because then, they may want, not that you want them totally manipulating your sound, so to speak, but it's got to line up and it's got to, work with the other tracks and everything like that.
yeah. And the one thing I will say that I've learned from experience is that make sure whatever you send the client, there's some instances where they're like, can you send me 3 versions of your solo? And
Oh,
I'm like, okay, sure. And once I send it off, it's kind of like they could do whatever they want with it. So sometimes I'm surprised where they might take a Frankenstein version of my solo, and I'm just like, oh shucks, maybe I shouldn't have sent them that, or they'll take a fill that I just kind of was like, oh, that sounds good enough. They probably won't choose that, and then they choose that. So it's kind of like, be sure whatever you're sending the client, make sure you love it too. Otherwise, like something might be out there that you recorded that you don't like, and I think that's the worst feeling, because you can't really tell them to change it, because ultimately they're the producer, or they have their own producer that's calling the shots. So
Yeah, no, that's true. And I remember going on one session where and this guy is really good, but it was like, okay, it was it was basically rock solo, and I think it was like 8 measures, and first take, good. Okay, second take, go. Third take, go. And I'm thinking, wait, hold on, let me take a breath,
right.
because like for me, um, I get wrapped up into like, each version, and it's like I need to just like reset my head, you
Yeah.
know?
Yeah.
And I asked, why are you doing that? Why are you doing that? And he's like, look, the more that we do it this way, we're not just taking the entire solo, we're taking bits and pieces and we're
Yeah.
putting it together. And that was painful to hear. Because I don't know, I tend to, when you're creating a solo, you're thinking a thought,
Right. Right.
and it's interesting how people will come up and, like you said, like the Frankenstein version, and sometimes it's awesome, a lot of times it's awesome, but as when you're in the studio, it's just a different, you have to be in that different frame of mind, and being aware of that, and you're putting your best effort out for each take, but knowing that, it's not going to be the entire take that you're doing that they're going to use. It's going to be a Frankenstein type of thing, a Frankentake.
And then there's some times where it's not like even physically possible to play what they tape together. I'm just like, that's not like saxophonic or musical at all. So, but
Well,
then
like
at the
like
same time,
urgent. Yeah, like urgent was, initially, it's just like, I mean, oh my God, but now people are able to do it and stuff. And now
yeah,
let me ask this question. So you're sending the WAV file, you're not doing any kind of mastering or anything like that. You're just doing the WAV file.
that's it. Yeah, that's the kind of beauty of it. I've recently started like delving deeper into like more finishing music production, but sometimes I think to myself, I'd just rather spend the time working on my instrument instead of doing audio music production. So fortunately, yeah, I just send them a raw WAV file. It's usually through Dropbox or WeTransfer or something. And once I send it off, it's like they themselves, or they have a producer or engineer that takes care of that. And then if it's a project that I really like, or that I'm invested in, I'll ask the engineer to send me some of the raw mixes that they do with, so I could hear what's going on. Sometimes I don't, like it's just kind of like I'm getting the job done, and then sometimes I never hear the finished product. But most of the times it's things that I like, and I want to hear what they're going to do with it, even if I can't, tell them like, hey, don't use that or do this or that. I still want to see how it turned out.
Well, also too, I'm just thinking, just to show people, hey, I performed on this person's album or this or that, so you can have that as well. Um, I'm okay. When it comes to this though, in terms of, okay, the financial arrangement, right?
Mhm.
So, I mean, there's a couple ways to go. Like if it's someone that has a big name, you may want to pursue royalties and stuff.
Right.
But I don't know if that's been the case for you, or if it's more just a one and done deal where you just get paid one
I,
time.
yeah, I would say like 95, 96% it's work for hire and one-time payment. I did a couple tracks this past summer with a producer that has a pretty big name in the lo-fi music scene, and we did like a 30% writer share, or a 33% writer share, like that. So
Okay.
that would be, so I have my affiliation with BMI Music Publishing. So, I was just, you got to be able to give him my BMI number, and they take care of that, collecting the royalties. But it's kind of a gamble. I mean, you can get like two, three, $400 for a one-time shot, or you could take a gamble and say, can I get, a writer's percentage? And if you take the gamble, sometimes, how it is with royalties, like
Yeah.
one stream doesn't even amount to a penny. So
Yeah, I know it's crazy, and it's not like people are buying CDs, it's Spotify.
right. Yeah.
Usually
So
Spotify.
yeah, so but I would say the majority is just a one-time work for hire payment.
When you're getting the work for hire payment, are you getting credit on any albums or no?
Usually they're courteous enough to clients that I would, but that's the other thing too. It's like that's in the days of physical CD production and distribution. So
Oh,
there's
okay.
not like, if you look up on Spotify, not every artist has like a full, I think they call it metadata for the track, uh,
Okay, right.
where they list like the engineer, the artist for the album artwork and all the personnel. So I think nowadays it's like with everything being streaming, it's kind of harder to find that credit, or like assemble a discography of yourself. And so, but yeah, I mean, hopefully it's coming around. I mean, I know in like the last 5 years, I've been on like two or three vinyl records. So those have my name, of course, in the liner notes and stuff.
That's cool. That's cool. And this is just a topic that I'm kind of interested in, but this is a great lead into you've got an EP out now.
Yeah.
Let's
Yeah.
talk about that. First
Yeah.
Light, I think it's called, right?
First Light. And this year I got heavily into synthesizers, physical hardware synthesizers. In fact, I have one here.
Yeah, I think you have a video of you doing drum beats on something. Okay, so
Yeah, well, here's the one. This I use this heavily on the EP First Light.
okay,
And
what is it for our audio listeners? What exactly is this?
this is a wavetable synthesizer, and it's if you've ever studied any kind of like sound waves or synthesis, you start with a waveform like a triangle wave, a sine wave, square wave, and then you add different filters on there and manipulate the sounds. And so I just took a heavy interest in it this year, and along with ambient music as well. So my current EP is kind of a departure from the last three albums that I did. So it's kind of a lot of hardware synthesizers mixed with saxophone, which I played through a pedal. So I
Oh,
use a reverb delay pedal also.
okay.
So this is new for me. So the last three albums I did were just straight ahead jazz quartet with acoustic bass, drums, and piano players, and me on tenor. And so that's available too on streaming as well. But I would say this year for my new EP, First Light, it's kind of a different flavor, a different time in my life, and I have different musical interests now. So
I was going to ask you, yeah, so what led you, what led you to switch up the style and stuff? And it's not even really switching up, it's really just exploring.
yeah, absolutely. Well, part of it, I'd always been into home music production, along with the saxophone recording I've done with clients. I've tried to produce and make my own beats, and a lot has to do too with like my Etude book series. I have one. It's a series called Beats and Bop,
I saw that.
where it's like a series of etudes where I'm playing bebop lines over various genres, like reggae, funk music, lo-fi, and so that kind of got me into like making my own tracks for my Etude series. And once I started exploring like recorded music at home, I got interested in samplers and beat machines and things like that. And then this year in particular, I started getting into hardware synthesizers. And then, putting that together with my saxophone, that was, it's just a lot of fun trying to find creative ways to make them mix together.
That's really cool. That is so cool. And just the evolution of what's going on. Because I've seen some videos with you for it was for P Mauriat. It was a P Mauriat videos with you and Arno Haas. And by the
Yeah.
way, thanks to P Mauriat for sponsoring this episode with Reggie, and they also sponsored the episode with Dr. Scott Littroff as well. But yeah, so it's interesting because the evolution of what you're doing is really pretty cool. But let me ask you this question. I wanted to also talk about your Etude books, and let's start with the Beats and Bop. What inspired you? You have another Etude book. What was the name of the other Etude book? I have it written down. Uh,
Reflecting changes.
Reflecting Changes. That one I think came first, right? And then Beats and Bop. So the Reflecting Changes. Let's talk about that. What inspired that?
So this was during COVID, the first year of COVID, and at that time I was pivoting, and a lot of my students came from online and from people all over the world. So I had a particular student in Maine on the East Coast that was studying me for a few months, and he said one day he was like, "Reggie, I can't do my lesson next week, but can you write me an etude on such and such standard?" So I wrote him one. He's like, "I really like that a lot." And he's like, "Could you do another one?" And eventually he ended up just like kind of financing this book. He's like, "Why don't you put a collection of etudes over these standards?" And I was like, "Yeah, that sounds like a great idea." So that's how I got started into making like, educational material. Started with a student during COVID. And then to take it a step further, I noticed, like play alongs and minus ones and Jamie Aebersolds have been around forever. But during that time of COVID and all the lockdowns, I was doing live streaming music with multiple camera angles. So once I figured that technology out, I was like, hey, it'd be really neat. Instead of just having a play along MP3 or CD, it'd be neat to have like a video of like the whole trio or quartet. So when you're practicing at home, you could see the drummer and see what he's doing and see the bass player. And in this case, Reflecting Changes, I have a guitar player. So when you buy the package, you go to my website and buy Reflecting Changes, you get the etudes in whatever key you request. And then you get play along MP3s, but then you also get play along videos. So it has me playing with the trio, and then there's like blank courses for your own solo. But during that time, you still get to see the band and how they're playing and comping and walking bass and playing drums. So I just
Wow.
thought it'd be a neat idea to make a play along video a series of etudes. So
That is so smart, and because most people don't do that. And here's the other thing too. So you have a play along MP3, that's fine. With the video though, it's probably going to be the same sound through MP3, but people, if they have a really good stereo system, yes, I'm using the word stereo, peoples, but if they have something that's like a surround sound,
yeah,
that could bring a whole, and yes, you could do it also with audio, but just having the video like in front of you and having the audio spread out,
right.
that can really enhance that experience.
Yeah, like an immersive experience, like you're there with the trio playing along. Yeah.
Yeah, what a great idea. That's a really, really great idea. And just just the interactive part of that. And when you were live streaming, so you had the quartet probably in your studio or something like that.
It was actually in my carport or like an outdoor garage. Yeah.
Oh my gosh. Okay.
So, during that time, we were all wearing masks still and
Right,
trying.
right.
So
Yeah.
it was good to be out in the fresh air and, and I have very gracious neighbors that they enjoyed the music. So we were able to play out there. But yeah, so, um, I forget, I think it was called Switcher Studios was the app. So it's an app that lets you use multiple iOS devices as multicam, uh, like a multicam system. So if you have like a bunch of iPhones or iPads, you can set them up in such a way where one's in front of the drummer, one's in front of the saxophonist, and et cetera, et cetera.
Oh my gosh. All right. This is all right. So Switcher Studios, it's an app. I never heard of this. And what about the sound though? I mean, so that's for the video. What are you doing to capture the sound?
So one thing that I discovered during that time back in 2019, 2020 was that if you have, well, I think you could do it with Android too, but you can plug an audio interface directly into your phone or iPad, and that will bypass the phone's internal microphone and speaker. So I have a mixer that acts as an audio interface, and all I had to do was plug that straight into the iPhone. And with the Switcher Studio app, it takes the main iPhone or camera and uses that audio. So I was able to have a mixer going straight into an iPhone, and that's how I captured the audio.
What mixer? Do you remember which mixer you used?
I think it's like an old Behringer mixer, but there's so many now. You could even take, like, we both have a Focusrite 2x2. You
Yeah.
can take another mixer, any type, and take the outputs from the mixer and plug those into your Focusrite, and then the Focusrite interface would go to your phone, and then that's another way. It adds an additional step, but But when I found that out, because like everyone was doing like live music streams and video recordings and collaborations with people around the world, but when I found out you could just record your sax straight into your phone without using a computer or any software or anything, and capture like pristine audio with effects, I was just like, wow, this is really quick. So if you see a lot of my content, it's just things that are directly recorded to my phone, like on my Instagram, where I just have an audio interface going straight into my phone.
Let me ask this question early. Where can people find your content, but also those videos in particular, if they're curious about this?
I think on my YouTube channel, it's just my name, Reggie Padilla. There are samples of the Etude series, but if they want to get the whole book, it's on my website, reggiepadilla.com.
Got it. Okay. This is awesome. And we're going to have, everybody, we're going to have Reggie's links in the show notes, more so on our website, saxophonepodcast.com, for this particular episode. And I think that that's going to be really interesting because also, as you said, YouTube, you're going to have samples of the Etude book, but especially so they can see, they can see the quartet and all that kind of thing, and start to get an understanding of the immersive
Yeah.
experience.
The other thing that I did on my Etude series, and this is something I also figured out during COVID, is how to make one of those like follow the bouncing ball type videos where the music is scrolling along. So when you see the examples of my Etudes, a lot of times, I'm not sure if it's in every single Etude series, but you'll see the notes going across as I'm playing them. And so I just thought that was a cool thing to have, because then even if you're not practicing and playing, you can listen to it, look at the intervals, or like look at the shapes of the lines and the rhythms, and see how they interact, how they match with the sound, you know?
Okay, now I want to know how do you do that? Because I know that there's certain like Alex Hahn, who's based in Los Angeles. He's a great player.
Yeah.
He uses oh gosh, I forgot. Oh, what's that service? He uses a particular service that he puts all of his books on, and then you could follow along. I'm gonna have to look that up later. But how did you figure that out for your videos, and how did you actually do that and figure that out for your videos?
So yeah, like the way I do it, I think there's more advanced ways to do it, but this was kind of like an easy hack that I figured out. So, I wrote all of my etudes in MuseScore, the free music software, or music writing software. And what I would do, they have a single line view. So instead of looking at like a whole sheet of paper or a whole sheet music, you could look at it scrolling across the screen.
Okay.
And so what I would do is just I would enter the BPM on MuseScore of whatever it was I was playing, and then put it in that single line view. And then I just did a screen recording of my computer monitor after I pressed play on MuseScore. So it'd go in the right BPM, the notes would be going across. They wouldn't like they didn't add on one by one, if that makes sense. Like, so there was like a whole line present, but it's still matched like the timing of the music, right? So like what you were hearing is what you were seeing on the bottom of the screen. So I know there's like even higher tech ways where it's like the notes just appear like as it's going out. I haven't figured that out yet. I'm sure there's a way to do it, but that was my workaround at the time.
That's smart. I haven't figured that out either. And it's also smart of you too. And it's unfortunate for people like me who've been using Finale since like before the year 2000, and then Finale just stopped. They
Right.
they they said, "Oh, sorry, no more support. That's it. You're done." Um, I bought Dorico. I haven't even opened it up yet. And I've heard some of the nightmares and some of the, people liking it or whatever. But you were smart to be with MuseScore. And just to remind people too, because there's different aspects of MuseScore. I get the ads all the time from MuseScore in terms of get 90% off, but it's not 90% off the software. It's 90% off of, I think if you want to be in like the community and being able to download other people's music or
Right.
something like
Right.
that, right?
Yeah, so there's a bunch, they have a huge library. A lot of it's user generated. So it's, I mean, a lot of times you're looking like an easy piano arrangement of a pop song. That'd be a place to go if you're to pay the subscription. But their publishing software is free. So if I wanted to write a lead sheet or write another etude or even do like a big band chart, their free software is capable of doing that.
You can, okay, so this was my question because again, I'm so used to Finale, and I tried to use MuseScore for a student, and it was really throwing me off. But I'm gonna attempt it again. Um, uh, the free version, so you can, how many staves can you use at one time?
I mean, I haven't made a big band chart in a while on it, so I don't know if they have changed it, but I've definitely written like 3, 4 part horn arrangements. I've done, full tunes for a jazz quintet, so like two horns and rhythm section charts. So in the past 5 years, I haven't gone beyond that, but
Okay.
I'm hoping. I mean, like it's all like when you start a new project, it's all there. It shows like asks you what instruments you want to add. So I'm hoping it's not limited, but we should give it a try, and see if we could still do a full big band chart. But I think I'm guessing you probably could.
Yeah, I've got a bunch of, friends that I've accumulated over the years that are awesome with tech and all that kind of thing. And they were always saying, use MuseScore, use MuseScore. But, was so into Finale and like 3,000 plus charts in Finale. And I'm having a heart attack when I'm hearing that they're, not continuing. And like, I haven't even updated my Mac operating system, because once I do it, I lose the
All the
ability to do any editing in Finale. I did save all my charts. I followed the instructions, but I want to make sure that I can get the charts into something else
right.
first. I don't want to have to retype those things out, because man, that is torture. But and Sibelius is so. I had taken a course in Sibelius, like a week-long course, many, many years ago, and it's just so different than editing, than inputting in Finale, that I was like, oh no, I can't do that again. I'm sure it's a lot different. I'm sure it's a lot better now, but MuseScore is a good option for people to definitely use. Let's hope that that doesn't go out of business too. I doubt it. For sure. All right, now that actually, we took that left turn, but it was kind of pretty cool, because we were kind of talking about equipment in terms of like recording or doing certain types of things. But I'm curious about your equipment, right? So P Mauriat is sponsoring. So what made you choose P Mauriat horns?
So in 2012, I had a really successful gig year. I was in a production show in Waikiki, and I had enough money for a new horn. So prior to 2012, I had been playing on a Yamaha 62 tenor for about, I don't know, like about 13 years or so. And so my first inclination was to try the Yamaha 82 custom. So I went to woodwinds and brass winds, because we don't have any at the time. There's no like Sam Ash stores here. We do have some good, really good music stores, Music Center of Hawaii and Easy Music, but not a
Okay.
lot of them carried the instruments that I wanted to try. So I ordered a few from woodwinds and brass winds. So basically, I tried the 82Z. I think at the time they were having some neck issues where the intonation was different. So people were like swapping the neck, where we get like the upgraded neck for the 82Z. So I got it and I was like, oh, this is going to be awesome. And I get it and I'm playing it and I'm just like, I had some intonation problems and it was different. So before I returned it, I ordered a Mauriat 66 unlacquered tenor. And my friend at the time lent me a Selmer Jubilee, and I also had a Phil Barone horn lent to me. So there was this time in 2012 where I was trying to get a new horn, and I was fortunate enough to have like 5 horns all
Yeah.
in room. Like I had 2 on order from woodwinds and brasswinds, and they were at the time. I don't know if it's different now, but their return policy was really great if you pay the return shipping. So I was able to like test out 2 horns and still return one of them. So I was in a room with Selmer Jubilee, Phil Barone tenor, the Yamaha 82Z, and the P Mauriat, and then my old Yamaha. And I would just continuously keep coming back to the Mauriat, and it had just the most character in its sound to me. It was kind of like a big, warm spread sound rather than like a focused sound. And I would just constantly come back. I'd had all these 5 horns in my music room for a month. And every time I'd go in, I would dabble in the other ones, but then I would end up on the Mauriat. So I ended up returning all the other ones and just keeping the Mauriat. And so I purchased my first one initially. And then the following year in 2013, um, between those 2 years, I kind of checked out the artist rep. And at the time, I had like an album under a different band, and I had some other recording credits. And I just kind of approached them and said, "Look, I really love love this horn. I'd love to be a part of the team. And they just started checking out my content, my web content, my discography and such. And at the time it was a gentleman named Keon Williams. I think it was part of the artist relation
Oh
team.
yeah, okay, he's in Arizona. Yeah.
Yeah, and then so he was gracious enough to like kind of uh, support me and say like I think you play great. And so I went to the NAMM show in 2013 and I met the president of the company, Alex, and I met the team and I got to try all the other horns so that's kind of how I got on board with them. And right now I still play that same P Mauriat 66 RUL unlacquered saxophone. I have it in the back here. I don't know if you can see it.
Yeah, it looks like a silver neck though.
Yeah, so 2 or 3 years ago, they came out with a Kirk Whalum signature neck. I believe
Okay.
it's silver plated. So I made a request to see if I could try it, and I just kind of continued playing that instead of the stock neck, and it's been a great combo. So there's videos of me, I think, on my YouTube playing that.
What made that signature neck? Um, what made you choose that instead of keeping with the original neck?
I think it had a little more cut to it, a little slightly brighter and more present. And
Okay, got it.
like coming from that warm spread and to have something a little more like focused.
Direct.
Yeah, so that's kind of part of the reason you use it. And I also tour a lot with a reggae band, a roots reggae band. I'm actually going tonight to Phoenix to play with them. But so in that environment, it's a lot different than like a jazz quartet per se, right? So if I'm out on the stage and I want to cut through, so this combo kind of helps me with that too.
That's awesome. So wait, so you're in Hawaii right now. That you're flying out tonight. Is that what you're saying?
Thanks. Yeah. So I'm playing a music festival there. I play with a band named Mike Love and the Full Circle.
Okay.
And there's a lot of footage online. If you look up that name, there's like a bunch of live concerts and different festival footage.
That's cool. And again, I'm going to look for some of these links. I'm going to put them in the show notes. And all right, so you're okay. You're flying out tonight, and so the Kirk Whalum neck. So you have this horn that has this warm, little bit of a spread type of sound. But what you did instead of, I'm going to ask about your mouthpiece in a second, because you normally we would have the mouthpiece like try to compensate for that, but you compensated with the neck. So I'm wondering like what's your mouthpiece?
So I was on Theo Wani for a long time, from 2013 to about 2021. And I love the team over there. I love Theo and
Yeah.
gentleman there named Matt Ambrose, who's wonderful, and Brian Vance also. And they make amazing equipment. And I used to play the Ambika, um,
Okay.
and it was the wider beak, like a wider beak, thicker mouthpiece. And now all their hard rubber ones are they're shaped like metal mouthpieces, but they're still made out of hard rubber. So the one that I was currently playing, they stopped. I don't think they produce that one anymore. So during the time of COVID, I just started experimenting. Like they'd send me some newer mouthpieces, but it just wasn't my thing at the time. So I reached out to Mark Sepanuk at 10M Fan
Oh,
Mouthpieces.
okay. Yeah, he's great.
And he sent me some things to trial, and I sent him video clips back. And I just during that time I really fell in love with his mouthpieces. So especially the Robusto. He
Okay,
has
got it.
called the Robusto. When I first heard it, one of my students brought it into his lessons, and I also heard like a video clip of Joel Fromm playing it, who's like one of my favorite tenor players. I aspire to that sound and that facility, but when I heard him play, I was like, oh man, I got to try that mouthpiece. So um, I asked Mark to send me. He sent me a bunch of different ones, and that Robusto is the one that I think it had the most versatility. It wasn't like a paint peeler or bright mouthpieces like high octane screamer, but it wasn't like so dark that that it was just not like a classical piece. So I think it had a good amount of sizzle to it, and of course the intonation was great. But yeah, I mean, I love that. And then more recently, I switched over to the metal version.
Oh, interesting. Okay. And you know what? I'm just thinking for I found about the 10M fan mouthpieces probably in one of the forums, and then I got a really good deal on the Boss. No, he doesn't make this anymore.
Yeah,
That's
yeah.
a paint peeler. Okay, that mouthpiece can like not just peel the paint, it can incinerate it. Okay, and
Right.
it's hard rubber. Okay, um, and I was like, wow, it really changed my perception because I had the belief, I was told this, oh no, you need metal mouthpieces if you want to play pop, rock, blues, that kind of thing, and you don't.
Right.
And Mark just shattered that for
Yeah.
me, you
Yeah.
know? And then from there, I went to the Black Widow
Yeah.
and I liked that one and it was cool. And then I've always I always tended to like better for me like the rollover mouthpieces on tenor. So I went to
Yeah.
the Chameleon. And the
Mhm.
Chameleon, oddly enough, rollover mouthpiece, but it was brighter than the Black Widow. And for me though, I just really that's again one of my favorite mouthpieces. Right now I'm playing the Jody Jazz DV hard rubber 7 star. That for me that gives me a little bit more of a direct sound. That's what I need right now.
Yeah.
The 10 amp fan Chameleon, you've got the power behind it. It's beautiful. For me I feel it has a little bit of a spread to it. I love it. It's just that some of the music that I play, I think I need that more direct um sound that's going on, and that's why like Jody's mouthpiece, well, Jody's a great guy, it's just,
Yeah,
and he's a
absolutely.
ridiculous player. But yeah, that's why I'm doing I have the DV7, but like on my cabinet over here, like I've got the Chameleon right there, and I love it. Mark is just works miracles with those mouthpieces. I don't know
Absolutely.
what magic he does, Hogwarts stuff,
Yeah.
but I'm gonna say this to everybody, you've got great people. Theo Wana is a beautiful person. He's an incredible guy. Great mouthpieces. Jody Espina with Jody Jazz. Incredible person, wonderful person, great mouthpieces. And if you've never heard of Mark Sepanek and 10M Fan, the number 10 M Fan, 10mfan.com, you got to check out his mouthpieces
Yeah,
because,
absolutely.
yeah, he
Yeah,
knows.
yeah. I've been on them since 2021 and I've made a lot of recordings on them. But it's interesting because if you want to hear an evolution of my sound, my first album entitled Almost Home was recorded on a Jody Jazz HR.
Oh, okay. Wow.
And then my second and third albums were with the Theo Wani Ambika.
And I could see that though, because the Ambika, if I remember it right, I didn't have the Ambika, but that kind of had a little bit of a darkish sound to it.
I was their darkest model.
Yeah,
And I
yeah.
feel like, naturally I kind of blow bright. So it was like a great fit for a long time. But then they started changing the design. Like I said, they moved to like a narrow beak or narrower beak. So, I couldn't really get a replica of it unless I asked them, which they would do.
Yeah, and you know what the key point from this is, everybody that's listening right now. There's a lot of things that go with your sound, but the first thing is it has to be your tonal imagination. You have to, have an idea of people that you want to sound like. Not that you're going to sound like them because everybody's unique. Someone had said in one of the podcasts, your sound is like your fingerprint. It's unique, you know? And you can have an idea of like for me, like the Dave Koz kind of Michael LinkedIn
Hmm.
kind of like sound. But there's no way I sound like those guys. I have a little bit of Stanley Turrentine in me because while his sound's a little bright for me, but it's the grit, I have that New York grit. You know what I'm talking about. And that comes out when I'm playing certain styles of music, but having the tonal imagination, but also understanding that there's a lot more involved. When you're picking a horn out, each horn and model has its own characteristic sound to it for the most part. And then the neck has a big part with regard to your sound. And when I was just talking about this today with my students. I did an episode with Steve Goodson all about the neck,
Hmm.
and there's just so much about it. And you also kind of reiterating that in a sense because you chose a different neck for your 66 model over there, and it gave you another piece of the puzzle for you. And then the mouthpiece adding another piece to the puzzle. So like certain things are going to complement each other or just enhance or bring out what you have in your sound, but it's got to come from your head first so you know what you're shooting for.
Yeah. So for my tonal imagination, of course, Dexter Gordon was the big
Oh yeah.
sound in my head. Sonny Rollins for sure. Hank Mobley, um, Charlie Rouse. So those were my main sounds. And then current day, like I said, Joel Fromm. And then another guy, again, like I don't sound anything like them, but I love Bob Reynolds' sound.
Oh God, yeah, yeah, Bob, yeah, he's great.
gorgeous tones, right? So, but I mean, as far as like guys I studied from the past, definitely Sonny Rollins and Hank Mobley and things like that. And
Big
that's,
fat sound.
yeah, that's, that's what I strive for.
You know who you should listen to, and I interviewed him for the podcast as well. Alexander Betts, Betts.
I gotta
He's
check it out.
across the pond, way across the pond from you, but he's across the pond, and he put out an album. This was a couple of years ago now. I think I interviewed him during COVID, and it was all like the soul sound, like the
Mm.
soul sounding tenors and stuff like that. He's got a sound too. That guy's really good. Alexander Betts. And I'm going to just make a note to myself too to put a link in the show notes for that as well, because I love exposing listeners to people that they may not have even known about before, and I think it's really cool. And that's why we're here also too, because I want people to know more about you. But it's so cool though how you explained how you got into P Mauriat Instruments, and the fact that you were able to try out so many saxophones, at once, and not living near a music store where you could just go there.
Right.
So that's really cool and lucky at the time. Although now Sweetwater, which is an amazing company, sweetwater.com, I don't they have a good selection. I don't know how big their selection is of saxophones. That's the only thing, but they have a great return policy to take advantage of. But the thing is, Reggie here's showing you how you could do some of this stuff, at home when you're ready, if you need to change equipment and that kind of thing. And I just think it's so interesting how you thoughtfully thought about, what, I have this kind of sound, but yeah, let me try this neck. Oh, wow. Okay. And then let me try this mouthpiece, and there you go.
Hmm.
Cool. Awesome. So, Reggie, listen, I wanted to thank you for being on the podcast. Again, remind us where people can find you.
I'm at www.reggiepadilla.com, and that has links to my music and also my Etude books. And then on YouTube, my YouTube channel, I believe, is just Reggie Padilla. So there's a ton of content on there. And then on Instagram, I believe on Surfing Sax, I want to say, I can't
Oh,
remember.
good thing. Okay, yeah, that's good for me to know. So at Surfing Sax, and
That's what it is. Let me just double check and make sure I'm not quoting myself wrong.
yeah, and we have to
Oh, it's Reggie Surf Sax. That's what it is.
good thing we looked. Reggie Surf Sax. Okay, we'll put these links in the show notes for everybody. That's going to be super important. But there's one more thing we have to talk about before you go, and we didn't get a chance to totally talk about this. So I'm on the video right now, guys. If you're listening to the podcast audio, thank you so much. Thank you. Give us like a 5-star review, but check out the video on YouTube. Right over his shoulder is a clear saxophone. And at first I thought that was the Chateau clear tenor, like that I saw at the NAMM show a couple of years ago.
I can bring it over.
Yeah, this would be cool. And I'm just going to talk while you're doing that. I thought it was the Chateau model, but it's not. It's actually the Vibrato sax. And so you're looking at this, those of you that are in the video, and the rest of you are going to be checking this out. It's so cool looking, right? And a lot of you have heard about the Vibrato sax and, what it can do and all that kind of thing. So let's talk about the Vibrato sax and the really cool thing that you did with the alto version of the saxophone. So let's first talk about the Vibrato sax. What's it made out of? What does it feel like? Is it how close is the sound to, like your setup, so to speak? And if you can use a regular mouthpiece on that.
Yeah, so it's I believe it's polycarbonate plastic, and then with silicone pads. And actually, I'm looking at it now. So the whole pad is silicone. There's on this model, I don't think there's any resonators on it. There's just
Okay.
straight silicone, and yeah, it just takes a normal mouthpiece. There's no cork. There's this kind of like foam padding here instead of a cork.
Oh, all right. So hold on. Okay. So as I'm looking at this, I see the foam padding. I'm thinking about cleaning this thing. So, I mean, do you run a neck swab through there? Can you, or
Absolutely, yeah.
you
So
can? Okay. And that foam padding, it's solid enough. It's not going to break, or like, do you need
yeah,
to put cork grease on that?
no, yeah. So I mean, I've had this for I think 4 years now, and so far it's been solid. But I can imagine if you were to just kind of rough handle it, it could potentially fall off. But
Okay. Probably, do you put cork grease on that though?
Not on this. Yeah, it's been able to fit my mouthpieces. So fortunately, I guess the diameter is like a comparable size to, so it the mouthpieces slide on pretty easily.
That's so interesting because I would think I'm just thinking about, like I never leave my mouthpiece stuck on the neck. I don't do that because then it could crack, and I'm sure the same thing is true with this. I'm shocked that you don't need cork grease on that. Okay, that's cool to know.
And then the sound is pretty close. I would say it's got a different tonal character than a brass horn, but it's really close. And on this particular model, the intonation is still good. So, but it's I would say it's like a different thing. It's not quite a brass saxophone, but it still still sounds like a saxophone.
Yeah, and I'm curious too though, how do I want to word this? Like repair people. Like let's say something goes wrong with that, right? Can repair people fix that, or do you have to fix it yourself, or
I think you probably have to fix it yourself. And then, as we discussed earlier, like this one comes in an assemble yourself package. So I think if you got that model, you'd probably know your way around. I think, it doesn't have quite all the same mechanisms as a regular brass saxophone. So um, I haven't had it have to fix it at all. I mean, of course, I'm pretty careful with my gear. So
yeah, and what's the action like? Is it harder to press down?
I would say, I mean, this one, it's still pretty light, but you still have to, it's like you kind of extra have to make sure the tone holes are closed.
Okay, got it. Okay, so you may it may introduce a little bit more finger tension in there, but yeah, but still, I mean, and yeah, when I've gone to the NAMM show, and I'm just trying to think back, because I went after you were there, and I don't personally remember seeing the booth. I probably missed it though, but I know I saw the Chateau booth, and the Chateau clear saxophone is not the vibrato. Everybody, I just want to say that it is a regular saxophone. What's very interesting is that the pads are silicone, so those pads should never dry out or need to be replaced, I would
Yeah,
think.
yeah, I mean, it's still in the same playing condition that I got it 4 years ago. So
That's so awesome. Now we've got to talk about what made you sort of vibrato saxophone and GoPro famous.
well, when I saw them at the NAMM show, like one of the things they advertised with it is waterproof. So being a surfer, the first thing that came to mind was like, oh man, I could go surfing with this thing and totally play music while I'm surfing. So that's what initially crossed my mind. And they were gracious enough to send me an alto, and I made that video. And then I published it myself, but then GoPro caught wind of it and asked me to reshoot it. So there's a video out from 2013, 2014 of me surfing and playing a plastic saxophone.
It's so awesome. We'll have the link for that in the show notes already. Some of you are probably looking it up right now as we're speaking, but I think I saw a piece of it and I was like, "Oh my God," because I wasn't sure about the pads in that, and I'm thinking, "Holy cow, I don't know how he's not ruining that horn." Crazy, but no. And then you said to me, do you remember what you said? Like, I was worried about the salt water ruining the horn, and you said,
Yeah, I just after I was done, I rinsed it off with fresh water, and
"It's just
it's
crazy."
good to go. It still works.
So you know what? Oh my gosh. Hey, listen, so if you're looking for extra practice time, you've got a vibrato sax, you could practice in the shower. If you wanted to.
And yeah, I mean, it's something too. Like you wouldn't want to bring your Mark Six to a beach and play like right next to the ocean. So this would be a great alternative for something like that. If you were at like a campfire or somewhere at a beach party and you still wanted to jam, you wouldn't have to worry too much about bringing this and having it affected by the saltwater air, or you could always rinse it off afterwards.
Yeah, what's interesting, and I joke around with my students and I say, I have my Trevor James horn, which I love, which is right behind me. And I also have a Mark 6, but I have a beach horn. I call it my beach horn, and it's a Selmer knockoff made by Joe Sax. And I got that horn because I was playing in the Hamptons a lot, and sometimes it gets windy at the beach,
Yep.
and I don't want sand blowing in my Mark 6. And
Yeah.
I didn't have the Trevor James at the time, so I had gotten this Cirrus, it was called, by Joe Sax. It's a great horn, but I wouldn't be as worried. I'll be a little worried, but I wouldn't be as worried, if sand got in that. But this, you
Yeah.
know,
You just plop it in the shower when you're done, and it'll be good to go. Yeah. So
That's so cool. That's so awesome. Okay, well, listen, Reggie, I want to thank you so much for your time. This was so great. It was so interesting and entertaining, and you shared a lot of great tips about, well, I'm going to say it, things I'm interested in, but I know a lot of people always say to me that they love the questions too. So again, I want to thank you so much for your time.
thanks, Donna. And then, yeah, thanks again for P Mauriat for sponsoring the podcast today. I play all their horns also for alto, tenor, baritone, and soprano. And they're just great line of horns, good craftsmanship, good quality control, and they're just fun to play. So
Awesome. Thanks so much.